If you live in California and you're trying to buy investment properties in Texas, the first thing you need to know is this. You can absolutely do it without ever leaving your living room, but you can't just do it casually. You need the right team, process, and you need to understand how deals actually move in our market. Because if you try to handle Texas like a local California purchase, you're probably going to miss the absolute best deals that are out there on the market, which is what we're here for. One of the most common questions I get from my California clients is, how do I know which areas are good, which areas are bad? Can you help me? Just tell me about the market. And honestly, Texas is huge. Like, you have Dallas and Houston and San Antonio and Austin, and every single market has good pockets, it has bad pockets, and then there's everything in between. So the way we simplify this for clients is by rating every single deal that we post. It's either rated with an A, B, C, or a D rating. And that rating is based on school ratings, the school rankings on greatschools.org and niche.com. And then it's also ranked by crime ratings in that specific neighborhood. So if you're a risk-averse investor, you should probably stay away from C and D grade markets and leverage more into the A and B neighborhoods. That'll give you a better quality tenant, it'll give you a little bit of a lower vacancy risk, and you'll probably have a more comfortable long-term ownership experience. But if you care more about cash flow and cap rates and your walk-in equity and your cash-on-cash return, then those C-grade neighborhoods, they'll probably make the most sense. They're usually going to produce the strongest income relative to dollar invested, but you need to be comfortable with that trade-off like I talk about all the time here on this channel. One quick note, we don't send any D grade deals, even if the deal looks amazing on paper. That's just not a bucket that we want to have our clients buying in, even if the deal is returning a 15% cash on cash return, but we know it's in certain pockets of the state. We're just not going to send. Now, some clients want to fly into Texas before they buy anything. They want to drive around the neighborhoods, and that's perfectly fine. But I don't think that's the best and most useful way to shop for a specific deal, because the odds that you fly into town, you tour a random street, and then you remember that exact street later, and then have the perfect deal pop up on that exact street, the odds of that happening are basically zero. So the better way to do it is, usually, if you're interested in, for example, Dallas quadplexes, you can look at the deals I've posted over the last 30 days or so. You pick a few that were in A-rated areas, and then B-rated areas, and then a few in the C-rated areas, and you drive to those specific properties, even if they've already sold. That way, when you're back home in San Jose or San Francisco and you see a new deal come through, you know what my A, B, and C rating actually feel like in real life, because you've already ran through a few and you have a good context for how I'm rating these things. You might realize, like, hey, actually, I'm super comfortable with a C neighborhood if the cash flow is strong. Or you might say, no way, I'm not touching anything over there. I'm only going on these A-rated assets over here. I only want the absolute best neighborhoods. I don't feel comfortable with anything otherwise. And either answer is fine. The goal is to match the deal profile to your actual comfort level. The next question is usually, can I see the property before I make an offer? And sometimes the answer is yes, definitely. But if the property's tenant occupied, which most of the time all of my properties are, then the answer is likely no. In Texas, especially on tenant occupied duplexes and triplexes and quads and small multifamily like we work in, it's very common that you don't actually get access to the tenant occupied units until you're under contract. And that's not unusual. It's done to limit tenant disruption, because you can imagine if you've got 45 showings and you're bugging that tenant 45 different times, that tenant has no real interest in that property selling or not. It's a miserable experience. So if there's a vacant unit, we can definitely do virtual tours, FaceTime tours, walkthroughs. All of that is very easy to do. But if it's a tenant occupied unit, really the due diligence is going to happen once the offer has been accepted. And most of the time, that's where our California clients, they'll get tripped up. They see a great deal, they want to fly in before submitting an offer, so they book the flight, and we coordinate the tour, and then we wait 3 or 4 days to finally walk through the property, and then they go back home and they think about it over the weekend, and then they'll call me on Sunday morning ready to make an offer, and that deal has been sold. And that's not being dramatic over the timeline. That's just usually what happens when you have a good deal, like a deal that you're actually interested in, that's motivating you to fly into town. Good deals in Texas, they don't just sit around and wait for you to get on an airplane. So if you're not going to be walking through the asset, how do you protect yourself, especially as an out-of-state investor? So Texas contracts are very buyer protective, especially if they're done the right way. The biggest protection is called your option period. We have an option period in Texas. Other states call it a feasibility or a due diligence diligence period, and this time gives you the right to terminate for almost any reason during that set window. Usually it's a 7 to 10 day window. On properties between, let's say, a $300,000 up to about $2 million, you might pay $250, maybe up to $500 for that right to inspect for a 7 to 10 day period. And during that time, we'll inspect the property. You can use any inspector that you'd like. You'll have access to all of the units. You'll be able to review those inspection reports. We'll negotiate any kind of like repairs or treatments or credits that are needed. And then you'll decide whether the deal still makes sense based on the walkthroughs and based on the findings from the inspection. You're also going to have opportunity to review all of those leases. You'll review the security deposits. You'll see a tenant ledger. And actually, side note, that tenant ledger is actually really important because a lease might say that a unit is leased out for $1,000 a month, but that doesn't mean anything if the tenant is not paying. So we'll want to see like some actual payment history. On top of that, most finance deals will also include a financing contingency and an appraisal contingency, as well as a time to review the title that comes back. So even though you may be submitting an offer before physically walking that unit, you're not blindly buying the property. You're getting it under contract, so you have the right and the time to perform real due diligence. Once the inspection looks good, the lease is checked out, title is clean, financing is approved, then we move toward closing. After closing and funding, the property officially transfers to you as the new owner, so congratulations. And that's when our keys are released, leases and tenant information are handed over, and the management officially begins. So for California investors, management and the handoff is usually done via two paths. The first is full service property management. You hire a local property manager. They handle rent collection, maintenance calls, tenant communication, all the day-to-day operations and minutia. The second is a more of a hybrid model. So you manage guest and tenant communication yourself from California, but use our vendor network on the ground here in Texas. So for example, if unit B has a plumbing leak, you call the plumber goes out, and then you'll save that 7 to 10% monthly management fee. And both models can work. It just depends on how involved you want to be on the day-to-day management of these assets. So yes, you can invest and buy investment properties in Texas from California. You can review deals remotely, you can submit offers remotely, you can do the inspections, you can close, you can manage, but the key understanding here is just about the process. You need to know how we rate neighborhoods, you need to know why the best deals are moving quickly, you need to know what protections you have once you're under contract and how the property gets handed off after closing. So if you're in California and you're trying to figure out whether Texas real estate makes sense for you, best next step is typically not flying in and driving some random streets. The next best thing that you can do is look at real deals that we're posting, understand your comfort level as an investor with A, B, C, D grade neighborhoods, and then you'll build a process that lets you move quickly once that right deal shows up.